Well, top landing gear are incredibly privileged. We're actually standing in a hangar at RAF Coningsby surrounded by Typhoons, and that in itself is quite a thrill. But with us, our guide for this little trip here, this tour, is Flight Lt Nick Callinswood, or Cav. Cal. I can't read properly.
No, it's fine.
Cal. Sorry,
my
Cal.
phone was in the way.
But Cal, you fly these fabulous machines. Just tell me what their role is.
So the Typhoon is actually a multi-role aircraft, so we're kind of jack of all trades, master of none, really. Originally, the concept for Typhoon was a air superiority fighter, but obviously since its inception, probably so late 80s, early 90s, kind of aircraft have evolved, and we've realised that we can't just stick to one role for an aircraft. So that's why she's kind of evolved, and now she's a kind of all-round air-to-air weapons, air-to-ground weapons, jack of all trades.
Yeah. But that's not what the original design was for.
Air defence fighter. That was what she was going to be, an air superiority fighter, missiles, that was it.
Okay.
But obviously with cost and evolution of jets and designs, they've gone, right, no, actually we can do more with that. We can strap some bombs on it, and it can be a pretty hefty air-to-ground platform as well as air-to-air.
It's always interesting, isn't it, when something is then has to undertake a role that it wasn't originally designed for. How well has it transferred to its additional role?
So pretty well, to be fair. It was never designed to carry weapons, but it's obviously been, I like to call the Typhoon a bit of an iPhone. So on the outside, they all look pretty much the same. You change the software, a few of the black boxes in the inside, and you've got a new aircraft. And that's kind of the idea of the Typhoon. So we can update the software quite easily, and it gives you a completely new capability. Obviously, what we pointed out before, the Tranche 1 over there, so that's pretty much just an air-to-air fighter. We can put some old air-to-ground munitions on there, but nothing like we're carrying today. So that kind of limits its ability. So that's why we've then upgraded the aircraft to the Tranche 2 and the Tranche 3 that we see in front of us, and they can do the full role of multi-role with Brimstone and Pavely 4, all the smart weapons that the Tornado used to have.
Which is what you came off.
Yes.
So and that was you were doing ground attack Tornado?
Yeah, so Tornado, again, back in the old days where we just went, right, this platform could just do this job. Yeah, I was part of the 2D brained mud movers, GL4. Yeah, as we got picked on a lot.
And how does it to convert, so obviously you're in mud mover mode for your first tour. Now you've got to also think about air defence, which is, well, there were crossovers always. It was generally, if you were a mud mover, you stayed mud, and if you were an air defender, you stayed in the air defence. So to move in from mud moving to the air defence role, how's that gone down?
Yeah, it's a big jump. I think it'd be harder for the air defence guys to jump into the mud moving role, personally.
Right. They've got to look at maps and stuff.
yeah. Printing and sticking was always hard for us. It's a big jump, actually, just to kind of appreciate the world is bigger than in your cockpit, and just kind of appreciate all the air-to-air, we call it ballet, but air-to-air fighting of how to employ different numbers and different threats. And as well as now, right, I might also be trying to get my bombs to a target, so I'm doing my original job, but I'm also fighting my way there in the first place as well. So it's exciting, but it's busy.
So as an air defence aircraft, obviously it's older now than some of the new stuff coming out, but I gather it still holds its own against anything that's coming out of the factory these days.
Definitely, and with some of the newer weapons we've got, obviously it's fitted traditionally with AMRAAM, so American air-to-air medium-range missile. We've just
that's radar guided.
That's radar guided, yeah. So decent mech scan radar in the nose as well, which will be upgraded to what we call an E-scan, so electronically scanned array, which is pretty much what all the fourth gen fighters around the world have got. But we've just started adding into the inventory a missile called Meteor as well, which is a long-range air-to-air missile as well, which is an awesome piece of kit.
That's a fire and forget type thing, was it?
It still needs a radar lock, but pretty much fire and forget.
And do you still have any Sidewinder sort of capability, or IR?
So we do have IR, yeah. So obviously this is where Typhoon excels. So the fact that it's got really powerful engines means that we can get these weapons really far, really fast, and throw them a long way. But also, if we do get into that dogfight arena, then Typhoon's an absolute beast, and we've got that IR backup. They're not Sidewinders.
IR being what? Sorry?
Infrared.
Yeah. Oh, infrared.
So it's heat-seeking, basically.
Yeah.
But no gun.
Oh, we have got a gun.
Do you have got a gun?
Yeah,
Okay.
she's nestled in there.
Oh, it is a gun.
Yeah. When we start looking around the aircraft, I'll kind of point out where it is, but we carry about 150 rounds maximum, but they're 27 mil, so they're fair size, and they come out at a fair rate.
And is that radar
assisted as well? Is it? There is a moding for a radar assist in there as well, but generally it's a kind of point and shoot type weapon and spray.
Fantastic.
So making that transfer from the Tornado, which was a two-seater, so you had a weapons operator in the back seats.
Bag carrier, yep.
Well, you say bag carrier.
There's 3 of our listeners.
Sorry. They weren't very useful people.
How much does it increase your workload going into a single seat operation?
So it's an interesting one because Tornado is very hard to fly well because it's very manual. So you've got flaps, various other manoeuvres to pop around with. Obviously, the wings moved as well. So you had lots of speeds, lots of limits to adhere to. So that's kind of why the pilot's head was fixed. This is a flying computer. The stick is not connected to any of the surfaces at all. It's connected to a computer. Right. So I say I want to do this, and it goes, okay, I'll do this and give you the best performance G as required. It self-configures. If I drop the gear down, all the slats and the flaps will self-configure. It's really easy to fly. I can teach probably all of you to fly this in about an hour.
Brilliant. We're up for it. Let's.
But that's the idea. But that's the idea. So a pilot's brain is now not focused on flying the aircraft, but fighting the aircraft. So you free up what we call capacity in order to kind of just manage systems, which the guy in the back would have traditionally been doing.
How's that changed the selection process for pilots, do you think?
So I've not seen the initial selection process, but probably if you look at kind of how pilots came in probably 20, 30 years ago, they're probably very mandrolically skilled, whereas now, maybe not so much, but probably more cognitive ability in there. I don't know, you'd have to look at it.
Still not getting in. How many are there on the base at the moment and in the RAF?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're in the 140, 150 mark in the Air Force, give or take, because obviously we take delivery of some and then we also scrap some of the older ones as well.
Are they still building them?
They are. Wharton still produce them for our export countries as well.
Okay.
How much are they? If I'm in the market?
Quite a lot. I don't want to write one up and find out.
So Nick, this is a QRA base.
Yeah.
Quick reaction alert.
Yep.
Is that right? Of which there are only 2 in the whole country.
Yep.
And the other one at Losibov.
Shh, don't tell the Russians, they don't know that.
So in terms of what operationally that involves, can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so any one point around the country, 365 days a year, we've got pilots in gear, ready to go with a number of these aircraft, loaded, ready in some sort of form, left, right, to go and get airborne in moments few, really. Wow. So as soon as that balloon goes up, if we get a phone call or a buzzer goes, you're sprinting to the jet, jump in the jet, power up, and off you go. And you can get airborne very quickly when you want to.
Yeah.
And that can be day or night. So you could be in a fairly deep sleep and the buzzer goes off and you, okay, right, run for the hangar.
And presumably you're training for that anyway, constantly, are you? Making a lot of noise.
Pretty much, yeah.
Fantastic. So, and what aircraft, you're talking about the different variants, what aircraft would you use for that? That would be the air defence role, presumably.
So all of them are all QRA capable. So obviously the Tranche 1 was only really that kind of envisaged as an air-to-air player. So that can still do Q, and which still does hold Q every now and again. But then it's just managed around the force. So we'll just put different jets in there for hours and things like that.
Okay.
Is there a big difference between the sort of the pilot interface with the Tranche 1 and 2 and 3, or does it look the same in the flight deck?
So hardware-wise, it looks identical. They're all the same, but actually behind the scenes, there's a huge jump, especially from Tranche 1. We have different software standards. Yeah. So we have our what we call 3.38 in our Tranche 1, which is it works. I'm trying to get an analogy, really. It looks like an Apple, but 10, 15 years ago, and you jump in this one, it's just a completely new iOS. Soft keys and buttons do completely different stuff, and the way some of the hardware works and integrates with the pilot is different as well. So actually jumping between the two can be a little bit tricky, but we tend not to do that. The squadrons have the new kind of software, the new jets as well, and the older ones primarily live here on 29 because we can manage that.
There's one 2-seater parked just over there.
A relic, yeah.
Well, so I gather. Tell me about the life of the 2-seater.
Not
long for this earth.
No, not at all. They are slowly being phased out because they were probably the first ones to come in actually in the Tranche 1. They've been heavily used because of obviously training. We've slowly evolved in the RAF to realise that actually we can use synthetics, so simulator training, and backed up with good ground-based training instructors and the single seat to basically go from never flown a Typhoon before, fly a few simulators, it's not a few, there's quite a few, and then jump in a Typhoon and go for what is your first sortie. It's fairly scripted. It's not like you can go off and do whatever you want. It's a very set set boundary of what you're going to go on that jet, and there's an instructor in the tower with you obviously monitoring everything as well.
It's not quite the same as having the guy sitting behind you.
I know, it's still kid gloves, but it's a big level of trust that we put in our pilots to go, okay, you've not flown one of these before, but off you go. I'm not saying they've never flown before. Obviously, they'll have been through years of flight training.
So they would have probably come off what beforehand? I mean, Tornadoes originally, maybe?
No. We don't really get that many crossovers anymore, because obviously the Tornado kind of crossover guys like myself have kind of either come across or they've gone a different way.
Yeah.
So now we've gone back to primarily having what we call ab initios,
yes.
so guys who've just come through the training system. So they will have flown Hawk T2, the new BAE Hawk at Valley before then, probably now Texan, which is the replacement to Tucano, and then obviously before then Prefect. Well, possibly. Yeah, Prefect.
I mean, that is a heck of a jump.
It does, yeah, and each stage you get faster, more manoeuvrable, so at each stage it is a big jump for the guys.
So from the Hawk to this, with a bit of simulator training in between, big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
Wow.
But like I said, the school here is all built on kind of graduated steps. You'll go through a phase, the general handling phase. At each sortie it'll be ramped up, different complexity, different kind of requirements of the student, and then obviously they'll go into the next phase and it will ramp up again, and by the time you leave the school you'll have done a number of hours simulated, a number of hours live in all the different disciplines that you can fly this jet in.
So from your entry point into the RAF as a student, if you like, if you took a typical route through to getting your qualification to fly this, what sort of time period are you talking about? If it was a typical,
if you look at the training system, the way it should run, it's about 5 to 5.5 years, I would say, trimmed down quite nicely. It's taking a little bit longer than that at the minute, just with obviously different problems, I would say, different things going on with industry, etc. Because obviously we farmed out a lot of our flight training to industry partners a number of years ago. But actually, I think that time's coming down now as well.
But you don't effectively become a useful pilot for 5 years. Are useful in terms of your actual ultimate role?
Yeah, that's it.
The first role you'll have will be flying one of these.
Yeah.
And that's 5 years.
And the thing is, we're still learning. So once they leave here, they'll go on to their squadrons. They leave here what we call limited combat ready. So they'll go on to their squadrons. They will then go through another workup to become fully combat ready. We'll then deploy, do various other exercises, and then they'll go through various upgrades. So they'll go through a pairs lead upgrade, so they can lead another wingman around, a fours lead upgrade, so they can control a flight. It's just constant. Guys will then come back here as qualified flying instructors, weapons instructors, and then obviously take that knowledge out to the force as well. So for our guys, it's that training might end, but actually you're still learning. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. You'd say it flies very much itself, the Typhoon. Sounds a bit like an Airbus. Does it? Is it still a joy to fly, or do you feel detached from it at all?
No, absolutely. It's an absolute joy to fly. To have that much power, that much performance, and potentially at your fingertips, it's amazing. Problem is, you don't appreciate it that much, because when you go flying, you're usually in work mode. You're busy. You're thinking about what mission or what sortie you're doing. It's only those fleeting 10-30 seconds where you look down and go, actually, this is pretty cool.
How fast have you gone on it? Have you ever done it, when you're on the motorway? This is my own analogy to suddenly you're daydreaming and you look down and you go, oh shit, 95 miles an hour. How fast can you go in this? I'm not saying you were daydreaming.
She'll do Mach 1.8, and that's a limit placed on the aircraft as well for various other reasons. It feels like she'll go a lot faster.
It's got a governor on it, has it?
Well, you have to actually bring the throttles back to slow it down, because otherwise I think she would keep going quite easily. Old jets, old F3s could do Mach 2, Mach 2.2 I think it was. But she would definitely do it, I think, if you let her.
Wow. What's preventing her from going for... I mean, is it wing speed, or is it just
No, so that is a rule for us, and that's, I think, governed by engines, skin heating, stuff like that. It's just obviously to preserve the aircraft a bit longer. That's why the F3s were all bent and flew sideways at the end of their life.
And is it easy, to sort of, if you're not careful, obviously you've got to keep an eye on limits. Like, if you take off, I imagine you take off at full power, and then all of a sudden, if you don't do something quickly, you're about to go through the sound barrier over land.
That's it. And especially with this aircraft as well, she will accelerate quickly. Even what we call in dry power, that's without using the afterburner at all. We've got various warnings in cockpit. We've got direct voice, so she'll bleep to us if we're going pretty quick. She'll tell us when we're in the transom.
I've got one of those.
Yeah,
In the Boeing.
and that's without carrying it. But yeah, brilliant.
What does that feel like? Mach 1.8.
A non-event.
Isn't that
Honestly, you
interesting?
park the throttle in jets of old, I took a Tornado just supersonic, and I thought the world was going to end. The thing was shaking to bits around me. This thing is an absolute joy. All you'll see is a little twitch in the altimeter, just obviously because the pressure over the ADTs just changes that pressure. But yeah, nothing at all.
Yes. You're saying that you don't really have time to fully appreciate the joy of flying this. Is there a big queue to become the Typhoon display pilot of this space?
There is.
Is there?
There is. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a bad season for, I think, the display pilot this year. I think he joined thinking it would be a great season, and unfortunately, because of COVID, has killed all that. But yeah, there's definitely a number of guys. It's tough, it's hard, it's brutal.
It's a super display. Is it Jim Peters who's just finished?
Yeah, Jim P did the second year as well.
Yeah.
So I think he's...
Is it, how long do you normally do it for? Is it just a year?
Normally a year, yeah. And there's been various suggestions that 2 years is probably ideal. As you'll have seen from Jim, his second year display was a lot better.
Yeah.
It's a lot,
I didn't see too much wrong with the first year.
To be honest, the first year was great as well. But the second year, he said he just felt more comfortable. He was in the zone a lot more.
To be fair, you've got 4 people who were going, wow, just watching them go around the circuit.
So it's phenomenal. I saw him at Eastbourne, and I'm sure the commentator, who was George Smokey Bacon, by the way, said that I think his parents probably come from down there. I think his mother was in the crowd.
I think he's down there
that day, and we were just sitting there saying, God, imagine if you were this guy's mum, and just look what he's doing up there. It's a cracking display.
Yeah, it's
an
brutal on the body though.
showstealer.
Yeah,
Is it?
Yeah. I've been fortunate enough to sit in the back of Jim doing a display at
Really?
height. Yeah, well, not at height, but about 1,500 feet.
Yeah.
And it was punishing, and that was in the two-seater. But that was hard work.
Punishing in the amount of G you're
physically,
pulling.
yeah.
Speaking of that, what are your G limits? Are they? Is the aircraft limited, or is it a body limit?
This aircraft will limit itself, so that's the thing. There's no limits to brake. It will just
So you
backstick
pull
it
as much as you want,
and it'll give you as much as it
whatever.
can.
That's fantastic.
So it'll do start again. It'll do +9 to -3 easily.
And so I'm used to obviously G pants. Are you full jacket?
Yeah,
and
we've got everything. So and that's the great thing about Typhoon, whereas other jets like the Raptor, for instance, will do 9G, but you've just got G pants. You haven't got a compression jacket like we have.
Yeah.
The oxygen's been rammed into your lungs to obviously balance against the jacket, squeezing you. It's all to do with keeping...
Are you tilted seating wise? Or is it
No, the seats are actually quite upright.
Yeah.
The F-16's quite reclined, but this one isn't. But yeah, it's the kit is really good. Once you hit 9G and once you get used to it, you squeeze initially, but then you can kind of back off and sit relatively comfortable.
At 9G?
Yeah.
Incredible.
I was 6 foot before I started this job.
Cal is 4'3".
When you took me on that little flight with our at Benson in the thing I've now forgotten the name
Katana.
of, the Katana,
and
I said, "What's G-force like?" And you'd been, how many G were we putting in
Well,
that?
we pulled about +3 and then -0, I suppose. So we were weightless, and that's what upset you, I think. The weightless bit, because you've never been anything like weightless before, have you?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I think we went up to about 3.5 G in that, and you feel, but no G seats. But I'm on the Tucano. We used to train up to about 6-7 G.
Yeah, 6,
with
7.
no G seats at all.
Yeah, that felt brutal back then as well.
I bet.
But having a body built to be a fighter pilot, obviously, I was okay.
Yeah, of
The tall,
course.
lanky blokes, they've all passed out.
Yeah, you went on to Wessexes and Pumas. You may know the story. Cal, just tell me about, do you call these canards?
Yeah, 4 planes.
4 planes. So it's basically a delta wing aircraft with 4 planes.
Yep.
How are those used? I mean, I guess it's all through the computer, but are they the equivalent to an elevator that you would normally have at the rear of a conventional aircraft?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So that's exactly how the Delta Wing works. And you'll see it's fairly in vogue with air forces around the world.
Yeah.
Saab Gripen, the Rafale, Typhoon. And that's because they're all really highly manoeuvrable.
Right.
But you can't fly them out of computer. So we've got 4 flying control computers in this. They've tested it down to 2 failed, I think. No one really wants to turn off a 3rd, and you definitely can't fly it without 4.
Yeah. So
No.
it's basically unstable,
Yeah.
this aircraft.
And that's why it's so manoeuvrable.
Yeah.
So if all the computers went down, it goes down.
Yeah, removable furniture and out you go.
And the back you've got those flapperons as well.
Yep. Yeah, flapperons. So again, all all self-configuring. You can take your hands off the stick and look down, and the foreplanes are doing this all the time, because I don't know how many moments a minute, but it's a lot that it's trimming itself to keep itself in stable flight anyway.
So you're going to show us around the plane?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it. Can we walk and talk?
We can walk and talk.
Yeah,
I was
Splendid.
maxing me out a little bit. So yeah, we'll start here anyway. So we've obviously got the foreplanes. These kind of park in this configuration. They double as a kind of a lift dump as well when we're on the ground, all weight on wheels dependent. In old aircraft, you'll have always seen the kind of pitot tube, the big sharp pointy thing which feeds all the instrumentation. We have these little fellows instead, which kind of double as everything. So we've got pitot static, we've got AOA, because obviously they're on different points of the nose as well.
AOA? Sorry.
Angle of attack.
Thank you.
So all that feeds into the flying control computers and gives all the information to the flying control computers in order to fly the jet. So they're very important little things, which is brilliant as a design, because if you come back round here, this little lump here is where the fuel probe deploys from.
Okay, yep.
So obviously it pops out, big knuckle that we ram into what looks like a big shuttlecock to take fuel, which when it comes out sits in line with these fellas. So if the basket misses and goes underneath the nose, it has a horrible tendency to collect these little things and bend them. Thankfully there's redundancies, but it's a bit of a pain, that, to be fair. So as we said, air-to-air refueling probe. So indefinitely really you could fly the jet for, but we kind of go on 9 hours as a maximum, and you'll kind of see why when you look up in the cockpit. The seat is not comfortable, and you've got to still be a human being when you're in the aircraft as well.
We could talk about pee bags at this point, couldn't we?
Yeah,
really?
we can. Yeah.
It's a serious point, actually. How important is pilot ergonomics? I mean, it's here to do a job, this aircraft, but you have, as you say, you have actually got to be capable of flying it on a long sortie.
Yeah.
So,
and not depreciate your mental ability by dehydrating yourself or anything like that. So yeah, you still have to be.
So do they think about that?
No, not at all. No, designed by engineers, not pilots.
Of course.
Yeah. So yeah, it's for someone my size, it's all right, but the bigger guys do struggle on the kind of longer missions. Especially when you're out in Cyprus as well, some of those might go 8.5 hours. That's in the jet, airborne, but also you might be in the aircraft probably 45 minutes before, half an hour before, and then the same when you've landed. Yeah. So it's a long time to be in the seat, and you need food, drink, and you do need to go to the toilet as well. So you've got to do that as well, and then store those somewhere, and then you've got the reason you're in the jet in the first place. So you need all your mission materials. So you become quite a ninja in storing things around the aircraft.
Goodness me.
So the kind of business end of Typhoon and into the engines, which are incredible. So EJ engines, so they push out a huge amount of power and reheat. It's got a 1-to-1 thrust to weight ratio for Typhoon, so you could cut the wings off it, stick it on its tail, and it'll accelerate and go up. She's an absolute rocket ship.
Goodness.
But like I said, that's what she was designed for: air superiority, getting weapons really high, really fast, so you can throw them further. But then, if it needs to, if you haven't stopped your adversary before getting to what we call within visual range, then we've got the agility, performance, and the weaponry in terms of ASRAM, so not quite Sidewinder but very similar, to beat someone in that visual engagement. And I've had the opportunity when I've been abroad to fight both Rafale, the French equivalent, and F-22, and you'll beat them if you fight it right. Yeah. You generally beat the man, especially in F-22. F-22's as agile, but they don't have the G kit, so they tire quite easily.
Why do they not have the G kit?
Because they're not designed to get to that. They're designed to kill you before you get into visual range, because you just don't know they're there.
What are you actually coming across? I presume it's Russian bears, or is that in terms of when you're based in the UK?
Yeah,
you're
UK.
flying east or north, and
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So the northern base for QRA generally concerned with, well, both really, airliners who need assistance and Russians coming in from the north. They'll pick up those guys, but it is generally bears, long range aviation, which are just floating down probably into the Med to do their own thing down there. And then for us down here, primarily airliners who want assistance, and we'll pick up some of the Russian stuff as it comes further south.
All the pilots are falling asleep. That's the other one. They're not making any radio calls.
Yeah, generally on the wrong frequency at the wrong time.
How often is that a thing for you to go and check out an airliner?
Not as regular as people think. I know it's in the papers quite a lot, but it kind of gets reported when it does happen.
Did you break windows?
Well, apparently, yeah. But that needs to happen. At the time, we don't know what's happening on board that aircraft, so we need to get eyes in the sky on that aircraft as quickly as possible, and that's how we do it. It's not to shoot anyone down, it's there to literally lend assistance if we can.
Yeah. And when you do come across a Russian bear or whatever it is, what do you then do once you come alongside it? Give it a little wave? Do you have signals that you...
Well, we're as professional as we can be airborne. Obviously, we don't want to get in each other's ways. They're generally flying in international airspace, so we're just there just to monitor them and make sure, because they're not talking to the usual air traffic frequencies, they can be a burden to civilian air traffic. So that's where we're there, just to kind of not guide them as such, but be that link of down to air traffic, right, this is what's happening, this is where they're going, and just kind of shepherd them a little bit to try and keep our own air traffic safe as best we can anyway. And
sort of letting them know that you're there.
Absolutely,
That's a big part of it.
They can't just fly past and not get a little hello from Her Majesty's government.
No, absolutely right.
So what else can we talk about? So obviously we talked about the gun earlier. There was a big story with Typhoon when it first came in that the gun was too expensive because of maintenance. So they went through this whole rigmarole of, right, we need something that looks like a gun, weighs exactly the same as a gun, shaped like a gun. What can we do? And they went through all sorts of like concrete in there. And they went, oh God, eventually just put the gun back in. So well done. So let me just pop this panel. There we go. So there's a fella mounted into the wing root.
What's that? What is that? What's firing?
27mm Mauser cannon.
Inch.
So it's about that round and about that long. So fairly hefty. They used to be high explosive. What we use now is what we call FAP, so frangible armour piercing. Really good against anything armoured aircraft. It can be used in all variety of targets. It's because it's what we call direct fire weapon, so low collateral, so you can employ it against lots of things really, from moving vehicles to aircraft really.
I'm being really stupid. Where do the bullets go?
That's what I'm looking for.
Here, just at the end. So the barrel goes all the way to the end. So this is a frangible panel, so the first round takes that out and the second round follows suit.
So what was the red tape on the Spitfires?
Yeah, exactly.
And Hurricanes and things?
Yeah. We've just got a modern version of red tape. So yeah, fairly hefty rate of fire. You're looking at about 3 to 4 seconds, so same sort of fire rate as your Spitfire or Hurricane before you're fired out. But obviously we only carry about 150 rounds, depending on temperature.
Is that very much a secondary?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the last resort, really. I would hope that I've used my medium or long range air-to-air missiles, my short range, and then I'm going for the gun. It's probably a last resort, or even in an air-to-ground role, that would be my last resort because I've got a lot more accurate and smarter weapons to use first.
And in 3 seconds, you haven't got a lot of 30-second chances.
No, and because it's not HE, I need to hit something as well. So again, it's a very direct fire weapon. Other stuff while we're here as well. So these chin ports, you can see they go all the way down here. So they're fairly hefty. About that round is where our AMRAAMs or our Meteors would sit. So if we were just using the chins, we can carry 4 of those. So fairly hefty amount of armament for long-range radar-guided missiles. In an air-to-air fit, we might carry 6 of those with 2 of the short-range IR missiles as well. If we were in a multi kind of role as well, we'd strap a designation pod between these 2 doors, which I can obviously then control from the cockpit. We'd add in here and in the other side as well what we call those Paveway 4s. We were talking about them earlier, so GPS laser guided 500-pound class weapons, so very accurate, awesome little weapons. And then on the outside, potentially look at the new Brimstone 2 fit as well, so the anti-armor, anti-tank missile as well. So can cover absolutely everything. So you can be doing any targeting on the ground in Iraq, Syria as required, and then you get a radio message and go, okay, fine, turn those weapons off, bring up my air-to-air weapons, look at my radar, and I'm now in an air-to-air kind of mindset as well.
And how differently does it handle with all that hanging off it if you're in pure air-to-air?
Not much, really? Actually, yeah, because again, all the flying control computers take care of it. She feels a little bit more sluggish, but not by much.
Yeah. This big thing here, I take, is a fuel tank.
Fuel tank, yeah.
Not a bomb.
No.
It's always a bomb.
These are our external fuel tanks. In the future, there will be an upgrade. Perfect. So the only way you can tell a Tranche 2 from a Tranche 3 from the outside is these little humps on the back.
Oh, yes.
So, and these will be used in future for what we call conformal tanks. So, you know, the exterior spine tanks that you get on the F-16. So we'll have eventually something similar. So it will give us more longevity in the air as well, which would be ideal.
Do away with these? Or?
I think we'll keep these as well.
Are these drop tanks?
These are drop tanks, so we can get rid of them if we need to. So internally, under the skin, we can carry about 5 tons of fuel, which sounds like a lot, but if I park the throttle, I can burn 800 kilos a minute. So I can burn it out pretty quickly. With the drop tanks, we can carry just over 6,000 kilos, so about 6,200 kilos of fuel.
Goodness.
So it sounds like a lot, but when if you're a bit of a heavy with the left hand.
Dropping these is
Performance. Yeah. Interestingly, if you fight, if you just train, for instance, and you fought a single seat with 2 tanks versus a clean Typhoon, if assuming that both pilots with the same skill would wipe the floor with it, the performance difference is huge.
How much does the skill level of fully qualified, experienced fighter or Typhoon pilots vary? And I see there's a little smirk on your face.
There is a little smirk, yeah. It depends how many Typhoon pilots are listening to this, who then call me up afterwards and go, no.
Who's the best?
It does vary, but obviously we get skill fade as well, because air-to-air fighting is a skill. So if you don't do it for a long time, or you go away and deploy and just do air-to-ground type stuff, then it will kind of naturally fade away, and someone who's done it more will be better. So I think that's enough of a sitting on the fence answer. But yeah, there is definitely a skill difference.
Is there? Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously we've got some more pylons on here, so we can do our advanced medium range air-to-air missile or Meteor on there, as well as our heat seeker on there as well. And this is not a real one, this is a dummy in everything but the rocket motor. So the rocket motor doesn't work, but everything else operates.
It's got a live head on it.
Yep, everything else operates as it should.
Gosh.
And we have a helmet as well, HMSS, helmet mounted sight, which I can link those systems to. It's a little bit like the Apache monocle. If I then look, that'll then follow me as well.
You have a HUD as well,
We have a HUD as a default.
but also you have a helmet.
Yeah, and then when I look back to the HUD, obviously it just operates in the HUD mode, but when I look over my shoulder, I can get various symbology as well.
And so does this give you sort of all aspect firing? Can you fire over your shoulder, for example?
Not quite. We can employ without having to look straight out in front, but that's kind of all we can really say on that. Another great system about Typhoon as well is Link 16. So lots of aircraft now have Link 16 stuff, so you can almost pass text messages between aircraft, but you can also see where they are, which is great with the whole beyond visual range, because in my helmet I can then look around and see little symbols where all my little friendly aircraft are, having not needed to see them. And likewise for anything that I've designated as a target, I can then look around and go, oh, it's there, which is a brilliant system as well. And it's all about getting that information into the cockpit as best they can.
God, remarkable.
DAS pods on the outside, so defensive aids, so relatively passive, just listening out to what's going on there. Will give us various indications in cockpit if anyone's actively targeting us. In the back of this one, we've got 2 little blanks, but what we can fit in there are something called turds, so towed radar decoys. They sit out behind the aircraft and just put out a massive radar signature for any missile to kind of home onto those rather than ourselves, if we wanted to carry those.
I think those are classified.
Other stuff, standard stuff, so chaff in the background, so just strips of tinfoil that's kicked out the back that fools radar. We've got various flares underneath as well, and we can strap on a few other bits and bobs as well.
Chaff hasn't changed since the war.
No, chaff is just old school, but it works, so we use it.
Window, it was called. Wasn't it?
Yeah, works nicely. You can throw it out in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, and it does different stuff, so it's quite clever in that regard. Some of the emergency stuff we've got on the jet as well, because we will talk about that. Obviously, engines are massive, hoof out a huge amount of power, 20,000 pounds per engine in reheat, so massive amount of power.
Is there any vectoring on those at all?
No, that's just them. The nozzles will get smaller and bigger depending on what you're demanding, but no vectoring. some of the jets can fly really slow and are really tight turners. They will vector their nozzles as well, but it's not how Typhoon kind of operates.
These turbojets or turbofans?
I have to get back to you on that. No, never been asked that question. I think they're turbojets. I think they're just jet turbine engines.
Is there a bypass ratio? Is there any bypass ratio?
A small bypass.
So it's probably a small fan.
I have to look at that.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Chop that one out. We've got a hook in the middle. So that's an emergency process only. So if we lose hydraulics and we can't steer the aircraft, then we need to stop it pretty quickly without letting it roll out. So we can drop that hook and go into a progressive cable. We can't land on a ship. If we did, the back end would stop and the front end would keep going.
So sorry, how do you use that?
So if the pin was all out in cockpit, I can press a button that says hook and it will drop the hook down. This will then swing, hit the ground. The horseshoe will go under a progressive cable and the cable will just roll out slowly and slow me down.
So the old military airfields
Have an arrestor wire?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And you've got a chute.
Yeah, so a brake chute as well. If we need to, if we're landing on a short runway or landing particularly heavy, then we can deploy that as well. That pops out the back and slows the aircraft down without using the brakes too heavily. But the brakes are incredible for what they can do. They can stop. Well, at takeoff is probably around 16, 17 tons worth of jet, and you could land straight away and the brakes would be absolutely fine.
Any reverse thrust?
No reverse thrust on this, no. Unlike the old Tornado, which had the buckets that came round.
Yeah.
It's all added weight, it's all added complication.
Right.
The brakes are brilliant on this, and you've obviously got the brake chute as well. Whereas the brakes on Tornado were, I think, off like a Ford Cortina or something like that. So they were terrible.
Who packs the chute away once you've deployed it? I always wonder what happens. Quite often at air shows, I've seen them deployed, and then you can never quite see what happens next.
There's usually a team just running around the airfield trying to scoop it up, and then they'll repack it and put it back in.
Right, okay.
Cal, the Typhoon is a JV between who? A joint venture between which?
So Eurofighter is a sort of consortium. So it was the Spanish, the Italians, the Germans, ourselves. French originally got involved, but then decided they went a different way, so they went and built Rafale. So that's why it looks very similar.
Yeah.
Interesting in terms of work share as well. I think the Italians build one wing, someone else builds another, and they all kind of come together, or used to anyway, and then got bolted together, which I think in the early days when they first made the first one was interesting because certain bits didn't line up.
Yeah. These are assembled in the UK for the RAF.
At Wharton, yeah. So they're built at Wharton, at BAE Systems there.
In terms of your operational sorties on these, I don't know how much you can tell us, if anything, about what you've done operationally in dropping a little bit of ordnance here and there.
Just a little bit, yeah. So I don't know if fortunate is the right word, but I was lucky enough to be on one squadron, so the Lossiemouth Typhoon squadron at the time when the vote happened to go into Syria. So we deployed to Cyprus. So that was the first time Typhoon had properly, I would say, deployed. It had gone and worked in LME, so in Libya before, but that was kind of as a bolt-on to the Tornado, because at the time it didn't really have much air-to-ground weapons capability. It still had some old GPS-guided weapons, but not really an entity on itself. So this was really exciting as like the first real deployment for Typhoon. We dropped, I said, 334-ish weapons and supported ground troops. It was awesome because we kind of saw we were operating primarily around the southern part of Iraq, so Ramadi with a few other areas as well. But you kind of see just over time the gradual winning of this campaign, and the people you're trying to move out of the way running away because they're like, oh, actually there's quite a lot of action going on here. So it was good to see that we're actually making a difference.
Yes.
Busy as well with different other coalition partners.
Yeah, and I guess for you guys as well, I mean, quite something to actually put all that training into practice, because it's a bit of a rarity.
Yeah, it can be. Some people can go through their entire careers and not deploy on ops. I was lucky that I got to go on the Tornado as my first kind of operational aircraft, which was everywhere. Yeah. So we did Afghanistan, I did Libya as well, and then obviously crossed over to this and have done Iraq and Syria as well. Yeah. So busy.
Wow.
Does it feel like this looks after you?
Yeah. It has
when you were in Syria,
it has its vices.
Safe, or did you?
I did. We know its weaknesses, and every aircraft will have its own weaknesses, but as long as you know them, then you can kind of mitigate them enough. But yeah, you do kind of feel safe.
Well, you have to be pretty cool to say you feel safe.
in one of those things, flying one of the fastest jets in the world whilst being shot at, and describe it as safe. I nearly did myself a mischief just getting into it. So you can see those photos of us in the Typhoon on our Instagram and Facebook. We want to say a huge thank you to Nick for showing us around, everybody at RAF Coningsby, and his lovely wife Bex, who actually organised it all. And since we recorded this, I think we mentioned in the last episode, they've had a baby. So big love to them. Next week, we're going to be in the simulator, and you can see whether Rob lands a Typhoon or crashes it. What do you think? If you've ever seen him drive, you'll know where my money is. Until then, take care. Let us know what you think on the socials. Give us some questions for Ask James, because our next magazine episode is coming very soon. Until then, bye for now.